let the stars reappear. Wait till you hear what sleep does, my dear.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be exploring how sleep supports your child's learning and growth, and uncovering the important links between sleep, mental health, and children's behavioral patterns and well-being. Now, today's webinar is co-organized by CHILD, the Center for Holistic Initiatives for Learning and Development, a research center under the Yong School of Medicine, National University of Singapore, and SunCare SG, a charity focused on supporting the well-being of children and youths. I'm Sun Xueling, your host for tonight, and today's webinar is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be shared with you later. Please pass it along to your friends and colleagues should you find the content useful. Now, let's welcome Dr. Cai Shirong. She is the Principal Scientist of ASTAR Institute for Human Development and Potential and Adjunct Assistant Professor, Yong School of Medicine, National University of Singapore. Hi, Dr. Cai.
Hi, SMS Sun.
Hi. Tonight we're discussing a very important topic. Actually, it's not just an important topic for children, maybe for us adults as well, because oftentimes sleep is taken for granted. With more young people nowadays in Singapore facing mental health challenges, I think let's explore together whether better sleep could be one of the key solutions to supporting healthier outcomes as our young children grow. So tonight, let's unpack the evidence, the local context, and what parents can do to support our children. Now, Dr. Shirong, how much sleep do children actually need? And is it sufficient as long as they clock the appropriate number of hours?
This is a great question, and it sets the stage nicely for our webinar tonight. So I'll start by sharing my slides. The amount of sleep that is required varies. That's recommended varies across the life course. And not surprisingly, of course, newborns will then require the most amount of sleep. As you can see in this figure, they will need about 14 to 17 hours a day, including night sleep and day naps. And this amount gradually decreases across childhood. So in infancy, between 4 and 11 months, they will need about 12 to 15 hours. And once they hit toddlerhood, between 11 to 14 hours. And when they reach preschool, about 10 to 13 hours would be good. And at school age, 9 to 11 per day. And once they hit teenage age, 8 to 10 hours will be ideal. And it plateaus once we hit young adulthood, where we will need 7 to 9 hours, and in seniors, 7 to 8 hours. Having said that, good sleep health is more than just clocking the number of hours as if it's another KPI at work. Good sleep health is in fact multidimensional, and aside from sleep duration, there are many other factors such as sleep efficiency, which is measured by how easily do you fall asleep or how easily are you able to return to sleep if you wake up at night. Equally important, it is whether you feel alert and functional in the day. Some people actually clock the required number of hours but still feel fatigued in the day, which might signify sleep problems that require further investigations. Very often, our gut feeling about our sleep quality is quite accurate, so the subjective assessment of the sleep satisfaction is also very important. Last but not least, regularity of sleep-wake timings is very important. To better appreciate why regularity is important, we must first understand that human beings follow a 24-hour internal clock known as the circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm regulates many biological processes, especially the sleep-wake cycle. The release of sleep-wake hormones also follows a 24-hour cyclical pattern based on periods of light and darkness. As such, it is ideal to sleep and wake at approximately the same time every day. But very often, adults and school-going children catch up on sleep on weekend by sleeping in. While some variations within a plus-minus of 1 hour is okay, big variations like sleeping in till noon might result in social jet lag, where the body gets confused and attempt to adjust to this new time zone. But as a result, one may find difficulty sleeping on a Sunday night and difficulty waking on a Monday morning, contributing to Monday hangover.
Thanks very much, Dr. Cai. Now, how do our children's sleep patterns compare to maybe what you see globally? Are we seeing shorter sleep durations amongst our children here in Singapore, and is this affecting them negatively?
So in a landmark study by Jody Mindell et al. On infants and toddlers in over 15 Asian and Western countries showed that Singapore infants and toddlers do tend to sleep later at approximately about 9:30 p.m. and they get just over 9 hours of sleep per night. While their Western counterparts in North America, Australia and New Zealand, they get a lot more sleep. They sleep earlier between 7:45 to 8:30 and they sleep over 10 hours per night. However, what we observe in Singapore is also mirrored in other Asian countries like Hong Kong, Japan, Malaysia, and Korea. Similar pattern is also observed in preschoolers, where Singapore preschoolers actually sleep late at about 9:45 p.m. on average and get slightly over 9 hours of night sleep, while their Western counterparts tend to sleep around 8 and get over 10 hours of night sleep. And again, the same pattern that we observe in Singapore was observed in other Asian countries, where they sleep approximately 10 p.m. and get only slightly more than 9 hours of night sleep per day. So it seems to be some kind of cultural differences in terms of sleep patterns indeed. And we also have some data from GUSTO, which is a large birth cohort study in Singapore, where we followed up over 1,200 children born between 2009 and 2011. And in GUSTO, only 1 in 3 of infants aged 3 months met the recommended sleep duration of 14 to 17 hours. And when they reach 4 to 11 months, about 50% of these infants meet the recommended sleep duration, which by now is reduced to 12 to 15 hours. Amongst the toddlers and preschoolers, they fare a little bit better. So over 70% of them will meet the recommendation for both weekdays and weekends. Unfortunately, once they enter primary school, this proportion dropped to just slightly above half on weekdays, and continue to drop further to almost a third by upper primary level. The silver lining is on weekends, a large proportion will try to catch up on sleep, with about 80% meeting sleep requirements on weekends. And the data that we observe in GUSTO also mirrors what was observed by a study done by NTU in 2014, where they observed that 4 in 10 Singaporean children aged 6 to 9 are sleep deprived. And interestingly, many of the parents surveyed were not aware that their children were sleep deprived. So what is the consequence of this sleep deprivation? So these children will then display daytime sleepiness and dysfunction. Almost half of them reported that they will fall asleep during their daily commute, and 1/3 reported feeling sleepy in the day, which will likely impact their learning and function throughout the day. And interestingly, in the survey, they found that watching television was the most popular activity that these primary school students were engaged in, with about 75% reporting watching television just within an hour before bed.
Thanks, Dr. Cai. You know what you just mentioned, right, about the number of hours children were spending in front of screens. In this example, you talked about watching television. Now, there has been quite a lot of conversations about screen time use and how it affects our children. In fact, the MOH screen time guideline recommends removing screens at least an hour before bedtime. Is there strong scientific evidence that doing this actually helps to improve our sleep quality? In other words, not having our children watch screens, that it actually improves sleep quality and also reduces nighttime awakenings. Over.
So many studies actually have looked at the link between screen time use before bed and how it influences sleep. So there is strong evidence suggesting that screen time before bed is associated with shortened sleep duration and delayed sleep onset or delayed bedtime. However, the evidence for other aspects of sleep, like sleep problems and poor sleep quality or awakening, is less consistent. There are several proposed mechanisms on how screen time can affect sleep. So the most obvious one, of course, time spent on screen displaces time for sleep. And depending on the content watched, whether it's very exciting or very interesting, it might result in too much mental arousal, and it might make it difficult for one to fall asleep. Blue light has also been believed to inhibit melatonin production and making it difficult to fall asleep. But the evidence is less consistent also because it hinges on the intensity of blue light that is emitted by the screen. And devices like smartphones may also cause nighttime disruption if placed near the bed, with incoming calls and messages waking one up.
Now, looking beyond the impact of screen time use, how does sleep influence our children's emotional health, cognitive development, school readiness. I think many of our parents are probably most interested in areas that do relate to the academics. So, for instance, does being sleep deprived actually influence development, for example, in the languages, in numeracy, memory, overall learning? Does it impact our children's learning capabilities?
So before we actually go into the role that sleep plays in areas like language acquisition and overall learning, I thought it might be helpful to just understand what happens in the brain during sleep. Firstly, actually memory consolidation happens. So what happens is that memory that is stored in the short-term working memory is now stored long-term. If I may draw an analogy, it's like having a librarian that puts the new things you have learned in a day into a long-term library for storage. And during sleep, strong and useful connections are actually reinforced, while weaker or unnecessary ones are trimmed away. It's like having a gardener trimming the plants, and this keeps the brain efficient, like cleaning up a messy desk. And in REM sleep, or better known as dream sleep, the brain links ideas in new ways. This helps with imagination, problem solving, and flexibility. At the same time, the lymphatic system also becomes more active during sleep, flushing out waste and toxins that accumulates during the day. This deep cleaning actually keeps the brain healthy and ready to learn again. And during sleep, it also restores functional connection between amygdala and prefrontal cortex, which are important regions of the brain, because prefrontal cortex is involved in focus, self-control, and decision-making, whereas the amygdala is responsible for regulating emotions, reducing stress, and mood swings. So this balance makes it easier to pay attention, stay calm, and think clearly. So taken together, sleep benefits learning by preparing the brain for new information, consolidating memories to make them long-term, and clearing out neural connections to make room for new learning. And this leads to improved focus, memory, and problem-solving skills. So with these processes in mind, it is easy to appreciate why sleep actually benefits language acquisition. During deep sleep or slow-wave sleep, the child consolidates vocabulary, strengthens declarative memory, and this is especially important in early stages of learning new words. REM sleep also aids procedural memory, which is useful for grammar rules, syntax patterns, and pronunciations. It also supports creativity and flexible use of language. Similarly, for math literacy, memory consolidation helps with remembering arithmetic rules, number facts, and REM sleep promotes problem solving and cognitive flexibility. So if better memory, focus, and attention enhance problem solving and creativity, as well as better emotion regulation, it is easy to see why sleep can benefit academic achievement. Moreover, better sleep is linked to better immunity and growth, and all these support better physical health for school readiness.
Wow, I think we're very motivated now to sleep more. Could you also share about maybe some long-term studies that you've come across that tell us about different patterns of sleep duration? Does that also impact later cognitive development for our children?
So we actually use the longitudinal data that we derived from the Gusto birth cohort study to derive sleep duration trajectories from age 3 months to 4.5 years. And we saw very interesting patterns that you see on the screen now. We derived night, day, and total sleep duration trajectories. And you'll notice from the figures that the most inter-individual variability is observed in the first 2 years of life, before the trajectories start to converge. Now we want to know how these sleep trajectories associate with later cognitive and developmental outcomes. So we conducted standardized cognitive tests like the Baileys at 2 years, school readiness tests at 4 years, and the K-BIT IQ test at 4.5. And we found that children with longer and more consistent night and total sleep trajectories and short day sleep trajectories had better cognitive, language, and numeracy performance. We also conducted a systematic review of all existing literature and concluded that indeed longer sleep trajectories in early childhood are linked to better performance on developmental assessments and intelligence tests, while findings on language and executive function perhaps is less consistent at the moment.
Thanks. It's It's a very, I think, a very strong reminder to all of us about the importance of sleep. I'm feeling a bit guilty already. I don't think my children actually match up to all the sleep indicators they have mentioned. But it's never too late, right? I hope.
It's never too late. Like the saying goes, right? The best time to start is yesterday. The second best time is today.
Okay. I think one other aspect that as parents we are oftentimes worried about is that we do see that in children who are a bit perhaps sleep deprived, they can behave in ways that are a little bit more, how should I put it? They can be a bit more hyperactive, and they may be prone to impulse, less regulation of behaviour. Can you share what does the evidence show in this regard? Because what I'm just sharing is like what we see anecdotally. So what does the evidence show?
So indeed, studies have shown that sleep deprivation can mimic ADHD symptoms, such as the ones that you see on the screen, like inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. And there are experimental studies whereby they actually restrict sleep in healthy children, and indeed they produce behaviors very similar to ADHD. And at the same time, they also observed separately in other studies, children with sleep problems like sleep disordered breathing do show ADHD-like behaviors, especially inattention and hyperactivity. In reality, there is a bidirectional relationship between sleep and ADHD. So early sleep deprivation increased risk of ADHD, while a local study done by the Institute of Mental Health also showed that they observed more sleep disturbances in children with ADHD.
We've been talking about children's sleep, but oftentimes I think mommy's sleep is also important, especially if the children are sleeping with the mummies. But I think we can come to that later. I was just wondering, could you share more perhaps about what we know about how maternal sleep quality impacts children? I'm not sure whether mommy sleeps, does the baby sleep, or, because during pregnancy, what actually happens? How does it affect our children's developmental outcomes?
So I'll start with pregnancy. So sleep disturbances such as poor sleep quality, insomnia, or sleep disordered breathing that happens during pregnancy has been linked to increased risk of many adverse maternal outcomes, such as preeclampsia, gestational hypertension, gestational diabetes, or the need for emergency cesarean section. And aside from adverse maternal outcomes, it also impacts fetal health, as there is also an increase in preterm birth, large for gestational age, as well as the risk for stillbirth. So poor sleep during pregnancy can contribute to maternal stress and inflammation, potentially impairing placental blood flow and nutrient supply, leading to preterm birth and low birth weight. And maternal circadian rhythm disruption and poor sleep quality may alter melatonin and cortisol rhythms, which are important for fetal brain maturation. So some studies have suggested associations between maternal insomnia or sleep apnea with higher risk of attention and learning and emotional regulation problems in children later in life. Postpartum, poor maternal sleep can also increase risk of postpartum depression and anxiety, which can affect responsiveness and bonding. Sleep-deprived mothers may struggle with consistent breastfeeding and feeding routines, thereby impacting nutrition and growth. In the first year of life, infants often co-regulate their sleep with the mother. And the mother's fragmented or poor quality sleep can disrupt infant sleep wake patterns, which in turn influence the growth hormone secretion and development. And inconsistent maternal sleep and caregiving rhythms can also affect the child's circadian rhythm development.
Thank you. I think you've heard a lot about the science, and thank you for sharing your research with us as well. I think maybe let's touch on some practical aspects, because I think parents always want to know what kind of strategies they can use at home. So do you have any advice, maybe some evidence-based strategies about what parents can do at home to encourage healthy sleep habits?
So before I address that question directly as to what parents can do, we need to also bear in mind that the influence of the entire socio-ecological system within which the children actually live and the sleep-related behaviors that can support or hinder sleep health extends beyond the home and the parents. So aside from parents, the caregivers, school and external environments can also influence a child's sleep as well. But going back to your questions, I promise I will share some do's and don'ts for good sleep. So like I mentioned earlier at the start of the webinar, regular bedtime and wake times will help to maintain a healthy sleep rhythm for children and adolescents, so it's easier for them to fall asleep. And in addition to a regular sleep schedule, it is also important to have a consistent bedtime routine to facilitate sleep onset. And bedtime routine is beneficial for children of all ages and not just babies, because bedtime routines facilitate sleep onset by creating positive sleep associations, with the steps of the routine serving as a part of behavioral chain leading to sleep and helps the brain and body to anticipate sleep. Of course, a comfortable and conducive environment which is dark, quiet, and cool helps promote sleep. It is also important that the bed is reserved only for rest and sleep, and avoid working and studying on it to prevent negative associations. Regular exercises helps with regulating circadian rhythm, reduce stress and anxiety, and increase sleep pressure. However, avoid strenuous exercise 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, as adrenaline may keep you awake. And as mentioned earlier, screen time should be avoided 1 hour before bed. And heavy meals should also be avoided before bed to prevent indigestion and discomfort. Caffeine should be avoided in the evening or up to 12 hours before bed for those who are very sensitive to caffeine. Although it's generally recommended that children under 12 years have no caffeine, but the truth is caffeine is widely available and consumed by a substantial proportion of children and adolescents. Although the children may not be drinking coffee per se, but there are many other sources of caffeinated drinks and food. And one very good example is the ubiquitous bubble tea.
Oh.
And last but not least, of course, long and late naps should also be avoided because both reduce sleep pressure and delay circadian rhythm, making it difficult to fall asleep at night.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, before we go to Q&A, are there any resources that you can direct parents to?
So even locally, there are many good resources. So for example, Health Promotion Board's Health Hub website will provide sleep tips all the way from pregnancy to adolescence. You can scan the QR code on the screen to access the Health Hub website. And just earlier this year, the Grow Well SG was launched, led by the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Social and Family Development to cultivate healthy lifestyles and enhance preventive care for children and adolescents by focusing on the key pillars of eating well, sleeping well, learning well, and exercising well. So when you enter the Grow Well SG tab, you'll be able to find more sleep tips under Sleep Well. So I hope that these resources will help you on your parenting journey.
Yes, thanks very much. I was part of the Grow Well SG team. So thank you for pointing out this resource to our parents. Now maybe we'll move on to Q&A. I think many parents have questions in their minds. For those parents who haven't yet submitted your questions, you can also leave a comment on my Facebook or via the Zoom Q&A. So maybe I'll just touch on some of the questions that have been submitted so far. There are a few questions from parents about what kind of strategies can parents use when their little ones actually look a little bit more energetic at night. They want to know how to calm their children down, what kind of strategies they can help to calm the children, especially when the children are really just running around the house, struggling to fall asleep. Or maybe if the children actually sleep with the parents, that, if they find difficulty falling asleep, then the parents will have difficulty falling asleep as well. So what advice do you have?
Yeah, in fact, we actually did a survey 2 years ago on 2,000 actually mothers with young children, and they did report that the most common challenge that they face when it comes to sleep is indeed bedtime resistance. And in the same study, so when we looked at all the factors, we were looking at what are the risk factors that predicts bedtime resistance. And we found that actually having a bedtime routine really helps with preventing bedtime resistance. So like I mentioned earlier, under the tips, having a bedtime routine actually helps the child to wind down. So having something like quiet music or having very relaxing things to do, like having a shower, actually helps them to wind down, and having a very calm and quiet sleep environment actually prepares them. So if they have a consistent bedtime, they will know that, by this time, they would anticipate that sleep is coming. So then they are less likely to actually resist bedtime. And also one thing to perhaps consider, if the child is extremely energetic at night, to review why they are actually so energetic. Is it because they took a very long nap too late? They had caffeinated drinks or they had too much sugar. So these are some of the things that we can also consider as well.
Is there like a recommended amount of time for this calm down period, the sleep routine that you talk about?
Usually it could be like 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay. For some of our parents, I think they really struggle and they're wondering whether or not they should engage a professional. Would you recommend that?
I know many people swear by it. There's a lot of so-called sleep consultants out there. They said that they're certified. I don't know by who. Yeah. But I think a lot of these resources, and these services are not cheap. So I think a lot of resources that you need, everybody needs, actually is easily available, like the Health Hub that I mentioned. The tips that these sleep consultants provide, it's just practicing some of these tips that are already there. Yeah. So you don't have to shell out a lot of money to actually hire all these sleep consultants. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm putting them out of job. But the truth is it doesn't have to be expensive. And the information you need is out there. I think Health Promotion Board makes it very easy for our parents. So the information is there. Of course, you can do more reading. But it can be easily practiced by the parents, and there's really no real need to hire the sleep consultants because they are really just reinforcing some of these good sleep hygiene habits.
Some parents also ask, I think they're sending through their questions on the Zoom Q&A chat about whether or not daytime naps, whether all that counts towards, the recommended hours that you had at the start of your presentation.
Yeah, so the recommendation durations include night sleep as well as day naps. Having said that, actually, especially for older children, the amount of naps shouldn't be very long anymore. It's only in the very early stage of infancy, that's when they have polyphasic sleep or biphasic sleeps. That means they would still have many naps in the day, but as they grow older, they tend to consolidate the sleep anyway. So they'll have one long night sleep and maybe just one short nap. So yes, the short answer is yes, the nap do contribute to the total sleep requirement, the sleep duration requirement. But it's important that night sleep shouldn't replace the naps. The naps can actually complement, but it shouldn't replace.
I see. Okay. Some of our parents are also concerned about because some of the children actually take naps in school. And I heard what you said, that actually day naps actually do contribute to the total sleep duration that is being recommended. So I think sometimes in preschool the children can sleep an hour, 2 hours. Is that the right time duration that we're talking about?
Depends on the age. The problem with preschools is that the age group varies quite widely. So we have infant care, or if we have toddlers, etc. So it's very hard to say because the younger kids would then perhaps thrive on a longer nap. Whereas the older child, especially when they hit 3 to 5, they may be actually ready to drop naps. So you'll find that these kids will be tossing and turning during nap time. But very often, I think that the schools, because they will need this downtime for the other children as well. So it'll be just a quiet rest time for these children.
Okay. There are a few questions that came in also about why their children still seem tired out even though they seem to have slept quite a lot. Maybe that has to do with the sleep quality. I'm not sure.
Perhaps. So one thing to maybe consider is the total sleep duration they have, to make sure that they really have the recommended sleep duration. Because from our study, we realized that very often parents do underestimate how much sleep they need. That's the number one. And also in terms of quality of sleep, we can actually ask the child perhaps whether they wake up very often or they have difficulty falling asleep. Very often, parents may not have a very good gauge. They might have tucked the child into bed like 9 o'clock, but maybe the child actually doesn't fall asleep until 10. So sometimes the actual duration that they get is not what we perceive it to be actually. So these are all some of the considerations. But of course, all things considered, and the child still appears to be fatigued, even though they have clocked like really 10 solid hours of sleep, then we perhaps need to consider whether there are other underlying health conditions that need further investigation. For example, like sleep disordered breathing or sleep apnea that is causing the fatigue in the day. And sometimes it could be anatomical. So for example, if they have like a deviated septum, for example, it might affect like snoring and the ability to sleep well at night.
Okay, so there might be some physical conditions.
Yeah.
So parents should, I think, consult their baby doctor to check.
Yeah. So actually, say things like snoring is not uncommon in children, especially if they're sick. There might be some blockage. They snore, but if it's persistent and loud, and like mentioned, if they wake up feeling fatigued or they have headaches, then this is when they need further investigations.
Okay, there are a few questions also about co-sleeping. Parents sleeping with their children. The questions are with regards to whether or not that should be encouraged in the first place. And secondly, if they're already co-sleeping with their children, then at what age should they wean off the child from co-sleeping?
Yeah. So for starter, I'll just maybe talk a little bit about co-sleeping. So there are two kinds of co-sleeping. One is bed sharing and one is room sharing. So bed sharing, that means they actually all sleep on the same bed. And this is actually generally discouraged, especially for very, very young babies because...
Safety.
Sorry?
Safety?
Because of safety reasons, yes. So also because there will be nighttime disruption when the adults get in and out of bed will cause disruption. But for very young children especially, there is the risk of sudden infant death syndrome. So usually we will recommend that if you want to co-sleep, for the baby or for the child to be in a separate bed. It can be a separate mattress and a separate cot in the room. This will also facilitate breastfeeding, especially in the early infancy period. So going back to co-sleeping, co-sleeping generally we believe that it promotes bonding and it enhances emotional security. It gives the child emotional security. And we also found in Gusto data that children that actually room share with the parents do sleep longer.
Oh.
So that there is some benefit. So these are in infancy, which leads to the other question: how do you kick them out eventually? They get too comfortable sleeping in the same room as you. So there are some tips and tricks. One thing is if they are old enough, like toddler or preschooler even, right? So if they are ready to move out, you are ready to move them out, what you can do is actually to empower them to make some of the decisions. Like, how do you like your new bedroom to look like? Do you want it to be man themed or, I don't know, Frozen themed? And you also get them to choose something that they will feel safe with. So very often there is separation anxiety when they exit the parents' room. So they need this security blanket. It could be like a pillow, it could be a stuffed toy. So ask them what makes them feel safe and secure. How would you like to decorate your bedroom? Or would you like to have like a nightlight to feel safe? So empower the child to make some of these decisions. And of course, there might be a gradual separation phase. Say, for example, you might want to, for starter, sleep in the child's room that they have painstakingly decorated. So sleep with them in their bed, in their own new room for a few nights, and then gradually pull yourself out. So gradually separate. So for maybe the first few nights, you will be sleeping in bed with them. Then after that, I say, okay, I'll be by your bedside and I will leave after you fall asleep. And then slowly distance yourself. Then you could be like maybe at the door, sitting by the door, sleeping outside the door. So it's a bit like the extinction method, right? It's gradually you pull yourself out and separate from these kids. And it also helps to have some form of positive reinforcement that couples with this. So I find that reward is actually very helpful. It doesn't have to, we have to be careful that it's not monetary or, you don't use a food kind of reward, but it can be something that the parent and child can agree on. For example, okay, for every night that you sleep in your new room, I'll give you a star. And then maybe by 20 stars, we can go to the zoo or something that the child enjoys doing with the parents. So in return, you also gain, you also get some bonding as well with the parent. Yeah, and I find that it motivates the child a lot, and they get a sense of satisfaction that, oh, I've earned a star today, and I'm a big boy now that I can sleep in a separate room.
Okay, thanks for that. There are a couple of questions for, I think, mummies with quite young babies. So quite a common question has been around the use of white noise to help babies sleep. In the first place, is this scientific that white noise helps babies sleep?
I think that the evidence is quite inconsistent. There are some that find that it's useful. There are others that are not. But there are also other concerns like, whether the volume of the white noise will also affect hearing of the child. So I think it's quite mixed. I won't say that whether it's for or against.
Mm-hmm. But I guess what you said earlier about, a calm environment, a quiet environment, I think all that is probably in most situations true. Because I think in the same question that the mummy actually sent through, she was also worried about whether white noise is too overstimulating. And you talked about the level of, how loud it should be or it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I think those are concerns.
Yeah.
So coming back to number of hours, right? You had shared your recommended sleep duration, but does what time one starts sleeping matter? So like, for example, if you recommend 12 hours, right? Is it 9 to 9 or is it 7 to 7, 6 to 6? You have mentioned circadian rhythm as well. Maybe you could share a bit more about that.
Yeah, so also likely tied in with the circadian rhythm theory. So the sleep architecture actually changes throughout the night and into the morning. So very often people will think that, oh, I need 12 hours. It doesn't matter what time I sleep. I can sleep at 12 and wake up at noon. But it doesn't quite work that way because, like I said, the sleep architecture is quite different. So because of the circadian rhythm, very often by around 10 o'clock, when you start to sleep, you will get a lot of in early phases. So like in the late night and early morning, you get a lot of deep sleep or what we call slow wave sleep. And then by the time you reach the morning or the wee hours, you will get more of the REM sleep. And both are important. So the slow wave sleep, the deep sleep, and the REM sleep are both important. So if you actually sleep very late, you might get more of one and less of the other.
Could you remind us again, what are the hours for deep sleep and what are the hours for REM sleep?
Usually after 10 to maybe 2 or 3, or what people always say, the most restorative period to sleep. That is when your sleep architecture will be more of the slow wave sleep or the deep sleep. Okay. And then comes morning, and that's where you have more of the REM sleep, and then that's when you start dreaming. Yes. So all things equal, if you sleep 12 hours from 10 to 10 versus like 2 to 2, there will be difference in the kind of stages of sleep that you actually get. So it'd be important to sleep early, basically. That is the take-home message.
Yes. Is there anything apart from routines that you talked about, right, to help sleep? Are there other complements? So, for example, certain food products. You had said what not to eat, right? No heavy meals, no caffeine. But are there some types of food that can actually promote and help sleep?
So generally, things like magnesium-rich food helps with relaxation. So magnesium-rich foods would be things like oats, spinach, bananas. And then tryptophan-rich food, because tryptophan is an amino acid that eventually forms melatonin, which is the sleep hormone. So having tryptophan-rich foods like poultry, so chicken, turkey, eggs, dairy products, so yogurt, cheese, milk. So there is some science evidence to it when when your mom or your grandparents tell you to drink a glass of warm milk before bed. So there is some scientific evidence to it because it contains tryptophan. Yeah.
Okay. Now that's easy to remember. Yes, that's all very helpful. Let me see. Okay. The other questions, I think you had also mentioned this at the start now, that in many Asian societies, children seem on average to be getting not as much sleep as their peers in perhaps some of the Western countries. And we also had talked about screen time usage. So some parents, after hearing what you shared about sleep duration, right, they may be wondering like, how to sleep like 10 hours in the local context. There might be a lot of distractions, or maybe parents come home late from work. Sometimes children might not sleep until the parents are home, So what do you recommend? How can parents try to balance their own busy schedules, and what you're recommending here in terms of the appropriate number of hours of sleep that children should have?
Yeah. So I think what you said is very true. I mean, part of the reason why Asian countries, they tend to sleep later and sleep less really is because of the work culture that we have here, right? Unlike in Western countries, very often they will knock off on the dot at 5 or even 4, whereas here we have like 6 o'clock, and very often parents have to work extra time. So it is quite difficult. But unfortunately, I think it's also about priorities, right? So I guess parents have to understand that sleep is actually a non-negotiable priority. So I think some of the contribution why Asians do sleep less is also because of the belief in terms of how important sleep is. I think Asians they rather spend that 1 extra hour on tuition, on enrichment, or whatever, but because they don't value sleep as much as the Western parents do, which is unfortunate. But I hope that after today's webinar, it changes the perception of the parents out there that, that 1 extra hour of sleep is probably going to do your child more good than having another hour of cram lesson.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I think we can always plan our time around it. So long you know that sleep is actually non-negotiable, it is important. I know it's important for my child, and I'll try to get there.
Yeah, I think the research and the studies and the outcomes that you shared early in your presentation are extremely important. Indeed, I think first and foremost, parents, I think in Singapore, oftentimes need to be convinced, right, that actually what is being recommended is actually evidence-based. It's scientifically proven. And yet talked about longitudinal studies, children have been studied over time, and we know what the outcomes are. So I think that's a very very clear signal to our parents. Now the question is, how do we execute it? It might need certain trade-offs. It might mean, like you say, maybe the children should not be spending so much time on tuition, sleeping earlier, weaning themselves off the TV or digital device. And parents may also need to take a step, which is to get off work a little earlier, spend a bit of time with the children on the sleep routine, So I think there's certain things we might have to give up in order to get to the sleep durations that you have recommended. But I think the evidence is very clear that sleep is beneficial for children, and I have no doubt that also sleep is beneficial for parents as well. So even though you showed, right, that with increasing age, actually we need less and less hours of sleep, but actually what you've shared in terms of research on sleep and the benefits of sleep, it's relevant to all ages, right? How our brain functions and everything. So as parents, we should also pay attention to our own sleep patterns and our own sleep durations.
That's right. Yeah. A lot of time, especially for children, they always model after the parents. Yeah. So if the parents do the right things, follow the routines, and have good sleep habits, I think that it's easy for the child to pick up as well. And they say, "Oh, mommy is doing this, so I should do this." So it's a family effort.
Right. So it's 9:15, and I think we should practice what we preach, because we better let our parents go so that they can start settling their children down to a sleep routine. Because remember, parents, 10 o'clock is a very important hour. 10 to 2. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of tonight's webinar. So to all our parents, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Cai, for sharing your very important research and sharing practical tips. I hope our parents can help us fill up a post-event survey. The chat room is also now open, so please feel free to leave your comments, and we hope that we can continue to bring you this series of very important, engaging, interactive, and helpful webinars to help in our thinking around parenting, and hopefully that it benefits our child development. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Cai, for your time. Thank you. Good night, everyone.